The bank statement sat on our granite kitchen counter like a bomb waiting to detonate. Anderson, Lambert, and Townsend, attorneys at law, $350. The line item glared up at me, sandwiched between Mark's usual coffee shop visits and gas station receipts. My husband of 12 years had consulted a divorce attorney 3 weeks ago, and he thought I didn't know. I slid the statement back into its envelope, my hands surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. All those nights, he'd been working late, suddenly made perfect sense. The password changes on his phone, the hushed conversations that abruptly ended when I entered a room. The way he'd stopped asking about my day or meeting my eyes across our dinner table. My husband was planning his escape, and he thought he was being clever about it. That evening, I watched him from across our kitchen island as he scrolled through his phone, his wedding ring glinting under our pendant lights. Mark looked exactly the same as always, his dark hair still showing those hints of premature gray at the temples that I once found distinguished. His blue button-down was pressed perfectly, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms tanned from weekend golf outings. If you didn't know to look for it, you'd never see what I was seeing. A man mentally checked out, already living in his after-marriage future. "Busy day tomorrow?" I asked, keeping my voice light as I chopped vegetables for a stir-fry neither of us would really taste. He murmured without looking up. "Showing that property in Oakwood Heights again. Second viewing, so maybe we'll finally close." His phone chimed with a text notification, and I caught a glimpse of Albert in the sender preview before he quickly flipped the phone over. "Anderson, Lambert, and Townsend?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Mark's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly alert in a way they hadn't been in months. "What?" I recovered quickly, tapping my knife against the cutting board. "Oh, nothing. That development by the new elementary school? Albert Heights? I thought maybe that's who texted you." The relief that washed over his face was almost comical. "Oh, right. No, it's Albert, my new client." He cleared his throat. "Work-related." I nodded and returned to chopping, mentally filing away this moment as further confirmation. Later that night, as Mark showered, I sat on the edge of our bed and allowed myself to really feel it, the hollow ache that had been growing between us since our last failed round of IVF treatments 3 years ago. We'd wanted children so badly in the beginning. I still remembered how Mark had painted the spare bedroom a soft yellow, a happy color for either a boy or girl, he'd said, his face alight with possibility. Now that room held his exercise equipment, and my teaching supplies, a silent monument to what never came to be. We'd stopped talking about it gradually, the way you stop talking about a trip you know you'll never afford to take. The treatments had eaten away at our savings and something deeper, our sense of shared purpose, maybe. I wandered into our home office and switched on Mark's computer, not entirely surprised to find it password-protected now. When had that started? Last month? The week before? I tried his usual password, his mother's maiden name plus the year we were married, but was met with an error message. Another change, another small betrayal. The next morning, I arrived early to my third-grade classroom and called in sick, something I rarely did in 15 years of teaching. Instead of lesson plans and alphabet posters, I found myself parked across the street from Mark's real estate office, watching as he emerged at 11:30, checked his reflection in his car window, and drove not toward Oakwood Heights, but downtown. Followed at a safe distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. He pulled into the parking lot of Vincenzo's, an Italian restaurant we used to love but hadn't visited together in over a year. "Too expensive," he'd said the last time I suggested it. "Not in the budget with the housing market so unstable." Through the large front windows, I watched as Mark greeted a blonde woman with a kiss on the cheek. Professional, perhaps, but the way his hand lingered on her elbow told a different story. They laughed as the hostess led them to a table, and I photographed their meeting with my phone, surprising myself with my own calm efficiency. That evening, while organizing files in our home office, something Mark never bothered with. I discovered credit card statements showing multiple charges, gifts from boutiques I'd never heard of, dinners at restaurants we couldn't afford, and most damning, a hotel charge from last month when he'd supposedly been at a real estate conference in Chicago. As I thumbed through these paper confessions, I heard Mark's car pull into the garage. I quickly returned everything to its proper place, took a deep breath, and prepared to act normal. To pretend I didn't know my marriage was ending before he was ready to tell me. Walking back to the kitchen, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. The crushing pain I'd expected was there, yes, but alongside it was something unexpected, a steely resolve. I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was facing and prepare accordingly. That night, Mark took a work call in the garage, the third this week, I made my decision. If he wanted to ambush me with divorce papers, thinking I'd be financially and emotionally blindsided, he was about to learn a hard lesson. I might have missed the signs of his wandering heart, but I wouldn't miss the chance to protect myself. Pulled out my laptop and opened a private browsing window. My first search, how to protect assets before divorce. My second, how to open a secret bank account. By the time Mark returned from his garage conversation, I had already mapped out my first counter moves in this chess game he didn't yet realize. We were both playing. "Everything okay?" he asked absently, not really looking for an answer as he poured himself a whiskey. I smiled, the perfect picture of an unsuspecting wife. "Everything's fine," I replied, closing my laptop. "Just planning ahead." I bought a small blue notebook the next day after school. Nothing fancy, just a $3.99 spiral bound from the drugstore, the kind my third graders might use for spelling words. But this notebook became my armor, my battle plan. "Evidence log," I wrote on the first page, then immediately crossed it out. Too dramatic, too obvious. Instead, I labeled it "Classroom Supply Inventory" and buried it in my teacher tote bag between stacks of spelling tests and reading comprehension worksheets. No one, especially not Mark, would look twice at another teaching supply. That weekend, I started my documentation process. While Mark was golfing with clients, or so he claimed, I meticulously recorded our account numbers, retirement balances, property information, anything I could find in our home office. I noted the password-protected folders on our shared computer, the ones that had appeared in recent months. I photographed credit card statements, bank records, and tax returns with my phone, uploading them to a new email account Mark knew nothing about. It felt strange, this secretive cataloging of our life together. 12 years reduced to numbers and assets, possible ammunition for a battle neither of us had officially declared. My hand shook slightly as I wrote down amounts and dates, but I kept going. Each entry felt like both a betrayal and a protection. On Tuesday, I ran into Bill Henderson at Kroger, pushing my cart down the frozen foods aisle when I spotted Mark's colleague examining frozen pizzas. "Sarah, how have you been?" Bill's smile was genuine, his handshake warm. "Managing the spring classroom. Chaos," I laughed. "You know how third graders get when they can smell summer vacation coming." "I bet." He nodded, then hesitated. "Haven't seen you at the office parties lately." I blinked. "Office parties?" "Yeah, you know, the monthly happy hours. Mark's always there. Thought maybe you just got tired of real estate talk." He chuckled, oblivious to the bomb he'd just dropped. "Right, those." I nodded, my smile fixed in place. Someone has to grade papers. Monthly happy hours. Mark had never mentioned any monthly events. For over a year, he'd been telling me he was working late on those Thursday evenings. "Well, next one's at Westfield Tavern," Bill continued. "You should come. Karen's been asking about you." I nodded, making a mental note. Westfield Tavern was where the blonde woman worked, the one I'd seen Mark with at Vincenzo's. "I might just surprise everyone and show up," I replied. meaning every word. That night, I waited until Mark fell asleep, his back turned to my side of the bed as usual. I slipped out quietly, padding down the hallway to his home office. His laptop sat closed on the desk, locked I knew, but his tablet might not be. I found it in his briefcase, and to my surprise, it opened without a password. Careless, unlike him. Perhaps he thought I'd never look. His email loaded automatically, and I scrolled through, my heart pounding so loudly I feared it might wake him. And there it was, a thread with Anderson, Lambert, and Townsend. Emails discussing asset division, strategies, and optimal filing timing. They were targeting the end of the month, barely 2 weeks away. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My husband had a countdown calendar to the end of our marriage. I forwarded key emails to my new account, careful to delete the sent items and clear the history. As I replaced the tablet exactly as I'd found it, a text notification appeared on the screen. From Karen. Still on for lunch tomorrow? Same place? So, Bill's wife Karen wasn't asking about me at all. She was part of whatever story Mark was telling at the office. Probably that we were already separated or that I was difficult, unstable, perhaps. Building sympathy before the bomb dropped. The next day, I called in sick again and visited my bank during my lunch break. I'd like information about removing someone from a joint account, I told the manager, a kind-faced woman named Patricia. Planning for the worst? She asked sympathetically. Living in reality, I replied. By Friday, I had opened a separate account at a different bank entirely, using my school address for correspondence. I transferred a small amount from my personal savings, not enough for Mark to notice, just enough to establish the account. My next paycheck would go there instead of our joint account. On Saturday, I drove to visit my college roommate Jennifer in Columbia. I'd told Mark I was attending a teaching workshop, and he hadn't asked a single question, further confirmation that his mind was elsewhere. Jennifer had become a family law attorney, though I'd never imagined needing her professional advice. We sat on her back porch, iced tea sweating rings onto coasters as I laid out the situation. "You're doing exactly the right thing," she assured me, squeezing my hand. "Document everything. Protect yourself. Don't confront him until you're ready." Am I being paranoid? I asked, still hoping somehow I'd misread everything. Jennifer shook her head. "You've found consultations with divorce attorneys, evidence of financial deception, and likely an affair. That's not paranoia, Sarah. That's self-preservation." That night, as I drove home, a strange calm settled over me. Mark thought he was being clever, thought I was too trusting or too oblivious to notice his machinations. That underestimation would be his greatest mistake. When I arrived home, Mark was in the garage again, another work call that silenced when I entered. I smiled and waved, heading inside to make dinner as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. While chopping vegetables, I mentally calculated how much I could move from our savings account without alerting him, how quickly I could secure copies of our house deed, what evidence I needed to prove his real estate commissions were higher than he reported on our taxes. The quiet investigation had become a mission now. Every day Mark thought he was getting closer to blindsiding me was another day I strengthened my position. I might not have been able to save our marriage, but I would definitely save myself. Monday morning dawned with unexpected clarity. I stood in our master bathroom, watching Mark rush through his morning routine, the precise 4 pumps of shaving cream, the careful passes with his razor, the meticulous parting of his hair. These familiar rhythms that had once felt like comfort now seemed like performances. I wondered how long he'd been playing this role of devoted husband while planning his exit strategy. "I might be late tonight," he said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "Clients want to see that property in Ridgewood after they get off work." I nodded, the lie settling between us like an old friend. "No problem. I've got papers to grade anyway." The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I called the school's administrative office. "This is Sarah Mitchell. I'm still not feeling well. I'll need a substitute for today, possibly tomorrow too." A twinge of guilt passed through me. I rarely missed school, but today's mission was too important. I drove to First National across town, where no one knew me as Mark Mitchell's wife. The bank manager, a woman named Denise with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, guided me through the process of opening a new account. "I'd like this account to be completely separate from any existing accounts," I explained. "Different statements, different online login, everything. If Denise suspected anything, she didn't show it." "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. We can set up paperless statements delivered only to your email. Would you like to make an initial deposit today?" I handed her a check for $500 from my personal savings. Not much, but enough to start. My school's direct deposit form was already in my purse, ready to be submitted to HR before the next pay period. "Perfect," Denise said, passing me my new account. Information. "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" I hesitated. "Actually, yes. My grandmother set up a trust for me years ago. It's currently linked to a joint account with my husband. I'd like to redirect it." 2 hours and several phone calls later, my inheritance, $42,000 that had been merged into our joint investments, was secured in its own separate account. My grandmother had been practical enough to include a clause allowing the beneficiary to maintain independent control. "Men come and go, but a woman needs her own money," she'd told me when I was 21. I never thought I'd need to act on her wisdom. That afternoon, I visited the county records office. "I need copies of all property records for this address," I said, sliding a paper with our home information across the counter. The clerk, a bored-looking man with thinning hair, barely glanced up as he processed my request. While waiting, I scrolled through real estate listings on my phone. Mark's commissions should have totaled at least $28,000 more than what appeared in our joint account over the past year. I'd checked his closed sales against average commission rates. The math didn't add up. Either he was making less than every other realtor in the county, or money was going somewhere else. The clerk returned with my documents: our home deed, mortgage information, and property tax records, all copied and certified. I thanked him and tucked everything into my tote bag alongside my teacher supplies and evidence notebook. My next stop was Jennifer's office. She'd squeezed me in between clients as a personal favor. "I've been thinking about your situation," she said, closing her office door. "You should consider talking to Craig Matthews. He specializes in divorces with financial complications." "I haven't decided if I'm filing first," I admitted. Jennifer's expression softened. "From what you've told me, your husband is planning to file very soon. Having a consultation doesn't commit you to anything, but it does conflict him out if Mark tries to hire him." I hadn't considered that strategy. Meeting with the best divorce attorneys in town would prevent Mark from being able to use them due to conflict of interest. By that afternoon, I had consultations scheduled with 3 of the top family law attorneys in our county. Wednesday was my day for gathering physical evidence. While Mark showed houses to clients, I methodically photographed everything of value in our home. The artwork we'd collected over the years, my grandmother's antique furniture, the signed first editions in Mark's study, my jewelry, including pieces he'd conveniently forgotten when listing our assets in the documents I'd found. Created a detailed spreadsheet, researching comparable items online to establish approximate values. My grandmother's mahogany dining set alone was worth over $15,000. The painting in our foyer, purchased at a local artist showing for $800 5 years ago, was now valued at nearly $5,000 since the artist had gained national recognition. Thursday evening, Mark mentioned our upcoming anniversary. "I was thinking we should do something special this year," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe dinner at home? I could cook." The suggestion caught me off guard. Our anniversary was still 2 weeks away. well after his planned filing date, according to the emails I'd found. Was this part of his strategy? To create a moment of normalcy before serving me with papers? That sounds lovely, I replied, matching his performance with my own. I've been wanting a quiet evening at home. His relieved smile told me everything I needed to know. He wanted me comfortable, unsuspecting, and, most importantly, at home. Likely so I could be served papers in person. That night, I made my boldest move yet. While Mark slept, I accessed our home equity line of credit that we'd opened for emergencies and withdrew $10,000, exactly half of what was available. I transferred it to my new account, then documented the transaction in my evidence notebook. Perfectly legal, perfectly divisible, and perfectly timed. By Friday morning, my strategic counteractions were nearly complete. My separate accounts were established, my documentation was thorough, and my legal consultations were scheduled. As I prepared breakfast, watching Mark check his phone for messages from his attorney, or perhaps Karen, I felt a strange mix of sadness and satisfaction. The man across the table thought he was crafting the perfect ambush. He had no idea I'd been redesigning the battlefield all along. The day of our special anniversary dinner arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine streaming through our kitchen windows, birds chirping in the maple tree outside. If this were a movie, the beautiful day would have been ironic foreshadowing. In real life, it just felt like nature hadn't gotten the memo about our collapsing marriage. I spent the morning at my final attorney consultation. Craig Matthews had the kind of confident demeanor that immediately put clients at ease, a quality Mark would have appreciated in different circumstances. Based on everything you've shown me, you're in a strong position, Craig said, reviewing my documentation. The separate accounts, the evidence of hidden assets, the property valuations. You've been thorough. What about the timing? I asked. My husband's planning to file within days. Craig smiled. Let him. The fact that you've protected yourself financially doesn't mean you knew about the divorce. It means you're financially responsible. No judge will fault you for that. I nodded, feeling the weight on my shoulders lighten slightly. And if he tries to claim I emptied accounts or hid assets, your documentation proves you only secured what was rightfully yours, and in reasonable amounts. You didn't clean him out, you protected your share. There's a significant difference. I wrote Craig a check for the consultation fee, officially, making him unavailable to Mark due to conflict of interest. 3 top attorneys in our county were now off the table for my husband. A small victory, but satisfying nonetheless. That afternoon, I channeled my nervous energy into preparing for the anniversary surprise. I bought fresh flowers for the dining room table. Lilies, not roses, because roses felt too much like a lie. I marinated Mark's favorite chicken dish, prepared roasted vegetables, and even made the chocolate mousse he loved, but I rarely had time to make from scratch. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, creating the perfect romantic dinner for a man who had one foot out the door. A man who likely planned to use this very evening to initiate the talk that would end our marriage on his terms. The domesticity of it all, chopping vegetables while contemplating divorce papers, struck me as so absurd I actually laughed out loud in our empty kitchen. By 6 o'clock, everything was ready. The table was set with our wedding china, another pointed choice on my part. Candles flickered in the early evening light. A bottle of the Cabernet we'd discovered on our honeymoon trip to Napa Valley was breathing on the counter. I'd even put on the blue dress Mark had once said brought out my eyes, though I suspected those compliments had dried up around the same time he started consulting divorce attorneys. I heard his key in the door at 6:15. Right on time. A rarity these days. Something smells amazing, he called out, his voice carrying the forced enthusiasm I'd come to recognize as his performance voice. When he entered the dining room, his expression flickered between appreciation and what might have been guilt. He was carrying flowers, grocery store roses wrapped in cellophane. A last-minute thought, probably purchased with our joint credit card. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble," he said, kissing my cheek briefly. "It's our anniversary." I replied with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Or it will be in 2 weeks. But you suggested celebrating early, and I thought, why not?" Dinner began with an awkward toast to 12 years together. Mark kept checking his phone, sliding it halfway out of his pocket when he thought I wasn't looking. Each time I noted the behavior in my mental evidence log while maintaining my pleasant expression. "Remember our first apartment?" I asked as we started on the chicken. "That tiny place with the leaky faucet and the neighbor who played saxophone at midnight?" Mark's smile was genuine for once. "And the bathroom door that wouldn't close all the way. We had to put a chair against it for privacy." "We were so happy there," I said softly. "Even with all its flaws." His eyes clouded slightly. "We were young. Everything seems easier when you're young." I pushed further. "And what about the future? Where do you see us in 5 years?" The question hung in the air between us. Mark took a long sip of wine, visibly uncomfortable. I haven't really thought that far ahead." "Really? I thought you were always planning ahead these days," I said, my voice light but deliberate. "Investments, property values, retirement, accounts." His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" I smiled. "Just that you've been so focused on our financial future lately. All those late nights working, the calls in the garage. You must have some vision for where we're headed." Mark's phone buzzed again. This time when he checked it, I said, "Anderson? Lambert and Townsend again? They certainly work late hours." The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Sarah, dessert before we talk?" I interrupted smoothly, standing to clear our plates. "I made chocolate mousse, your favorite." In the kitchen, I allowed myself a moment of bitter satisfaction. His face, that perfect mixture of shock and panic, was almost worth the weeks of deception. When I returned with the dessert, Mark had composed himself, though his hands trembled slightly as he accepted the crystal dish. "How long have you known?" he finally asked, dessert untouched. I took a small bite of mousse, letting the rich chocolate melt on my tongue before answering. "About the divorce? Or about Karen?" His sharp intake of breath was answer enough. "I think you wanted to have this conversation tonight," I said calmly. "Something about new beginnings, irreconcilable differences, growing apart. You probably rehearsed it. So go ahead, Mark. Tell me how you want to end our marriage." He stared at me, the practiced speech dying on his lips. "You knew all along?" "Not all along," I conceded. "But certainly before you were ready for me to know." Mark's confident facade crumbled entirely. This wasn't how he'd planned it. I wasn't tearful or begging or blindsided. The script he'd written in his mind had been completely upended. "The papers," he mumbled. "They're being filed Monday." I nodded. "I know that too." His eyes narrowed with sudden suspicion. "What have you done, Sarah?" I took another bite of mousse, savoring not just the chocolate but the moment itself. "I've simply been preparing, Mark, just like you." The weeks following our anniversary dinner unfolded like scenes from a play I never auditioned for, but somehow knew all my lines. Mark moved out 3 days later, taking only his clothes and personal items, leaving behind the furniture he'd once carefully selected, the books he'd claimed to cherish, the life we'd built together. He didn't fight me for the house. Not yet, anyway. The divorce papers arrived exactly when he said they would. I read them at my kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold beside me. The language was so clinical, so detached. Irreconcilable differences, and equitable distribution of assets. Nothing about the real reasons. His secret bank account, his relationship with Karen, the gradual erosion of trust that had happened long before I found that first bank statement. When I handed the papers to Craig Matthews, he nodded approvingly at my annotations and documentation. "Mark's attorney seems surprised by your level of preparation," he said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. They were expecting the standard shocked wife response: emotional decisions, rushed agreements, missed details. And instead? I asked. Instead, they're facing someone who documented everything and protected her interests before they even filed. You've completely changed the power dynamic. That power shift became even more apparent at our first mediation session. I arrived early, settling into the conference room with my organized binder of financial records. When Mark entered with his attorney, a young man with an expensive tie and an overconfident demeanor, I met his gaze steadily as Mitchell has provided extensive documentation of undisclosed assets, Craig began, sliding copies of my evidence across the table, including approximately $28,000 in real estate commissions absent from your joint accounts, Mr. Mitchell. Mark's attorney flipped through the pages with growing concern. "We'll need time to review these allegations." "Not allegations," I corrected. Quietly. "Facts. I have copies of closing documents, commission statements, and transfers to an account at First State Bank that doesn't appear in any of our joint financial disclosures." Mark's face flushed red. This wasn't how his story was supposed to go. The mediator, a gray-haired woman with decades of experience in her eyes, suppressed what might have been a smile. "Perhaps," she suggested, "we should reschedule after Mr. Mitchell has had time to provide a complete financial disclosure." In the parking lot afterward, Mark caught up to me. "How did you find out about everything?" he demanded, his voice a mixture of anger and grudging respect. I turned to face him, the spring sunshine warm on my back. "You left clues everywhere. Mark, the real question is, how did you think I wouldn't notice? The community dynamic surprised me most. I'd dreaded facing our neighbors, friends, and colleagues after the news broke. Would they take sides? Would I become the object of pity or gossip? Instead, I discovered unexpected allies. Diane from my book club brought dinner one evening, staying to share a bottle of wine. "We all saw it coming," she admitted. "The way he'd flirt at neighborhood gatherings the late hours. Nobody knew how to tell you." My principal, Dr. Stevens, called me into her office one afternoon. I braced for awkwardness, but instead found support. "My first husband did something similar," she shared. "Tried to leave me with nothing after 15 years. Take all the personal days you need for court dates. Your job is secure here." Even Mark's longtime colleague, Bill Henderson, approached me at the grocery store. "Sarah, I want you to know that not everyone at the office supports what Mark did. Karen quit last week. Apparently their relationship wasn't what she thought it was going to be." The divorce proceedings stretched through summer. Mark's initial confidence crumbled as his attorney realized they were outmatched by my preparation. The final settlement reflected this reality. I kept the house, my pension remained untouched, and the court ordered a full accounting of the hidden assets Mark had tried to protect. By September, I stood in my classroom arranging desks for a new school year. The divorce was finalized, the financial issues settled. The wedding ring that had left a pale band on my finger was now in a drawer at home, not discarded, but filed away like a chapter of my life that had reached its conclusion. "Ms. Mitchell?" A voice from the doorway pulled me from my thoughts. Linda, the school secretary, stood there with a vase of sunflowers. "These just arrived for you." The card read simply, "To new beginnings. You're stronger than you know. Jennifer." That evening, I walked through my house now, legally and emotionally. I'd repainted the living room a soft sage green. Replacing the beige Mark had insisted was better for resale value. The spare bedroom that had once held the ghosts of our infertility journey was now my home office, bright and purposeful. Small changes that signaled bigger transformations. I opened my laptop and logged into my financial accounts. All organized, all protected, all mine. The numbers reflected not just the settlement, but my new salary increase from taking on department head responsibilities. Financial independence wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving on my own terms. Later, sitting on my back patio with a glass of wine, I watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The marriage was over, but I was still here, stronger, wiser, and unexpectedly at peace. Mark had plotted his exit strategy thinking I would be blindsided and broken. Instead, I had rebuilt myself before he even knew the foundation was cracking. 1 year after finding that first bank statement, I realized the greatest thing I'd salvaged from our marriage wasn't the house, or the savings, or even my dignity. It was the discovery of my own resilience, a strength I'd always had but never needed to test until Mark underestimated me. Did he really think I wouldn't notice? Perhaps the better question was, did I ever imagine how much I could handle? The answer was clearer now than ever before.